9 weeks. Wow, 9 days, 3 weeks, right? He built it. So he brings a verse from Kohelech, and it says, Sofek Devar Hakol Nishma Et Ha Elohim. You know this? It's a famous. What is it? Tell me. It's a group effort. We're in it together. Say it.
I don't know. Say it.
All right, fine. Anyway, the point is, Yerad, he says like this. He says that a person who fears God and keeps the commandment, for this is all of man. Right? For this is all of man. And so what we're going to just go over, just a few points here, is to say, because the Gemara is going to ask a question, what does it mean that this is all of man? All right, a person fears Hashem, they keep the Torah, fine, their words are heard. But why does the Gemara have to say, so it says, what's the meaning of this expression, ki ze kol ha'adam, right? What does it mean that for this is all of man? So there's going to be 3 different opinions, and this opinion, the reason why I'm bringing this idea to start with, is to say, or is to bring this idea and to say, like, hey, this is the beginning of the whole concept of why God created a Jewish nation. And it doesn't say this, it talks about mankind, it talks about a Ben Adam. This is the reason why there's a Jewish nation. So the first person that comes is Rav Eliezer, right? Rav Elazar. And Rav Elazar, if everyone knows, Rav Elazar is the famous person who was around during the time of the Second Temple was destroyed, and he was a young guy, right? He was a young guy, he was like 18 years old, and you have Rav Gamliel, Shimon Rav Gamliel, he's like the grandson of Rav Gamliel Hazokin, who was one of the 10 martyrs, and you have Yehuda Nasi, and this is the son, and he was the head of a Beis Midrash. There was a lot of controversy around this Beis Midrash, and the different things that Rav Gamliel was doing, and so they voted him out, and they brought in Rav Elazar. And Rav Elazar was a young guy. He was like 18 years old, and this was literally the first Beis Midrash. Me and my wife, we went down to Yavna, and Yavna is a place here in Israel, and it's where the Jews, when the destruction of the temple happened, they left, and they went down to Yavna, and they reestablished a Beis Midrash. They negotiated with the Romans, the whole thing, and they went down to Yavna, and actually Rav Gamliel is buried there. And so Pesach Sheni of this year, we went down, and we were so inspired by this whole story, because, whatever, there's a whole Rashi that Rashi brings during Achrei Mot about Rav Elazar, whatever. But the point is, we went down there, and whatever. So this is Rav Elazar. And Rav Elazar says, he says, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he says, the Holy One, blessed He. He says, I'm going to say it in English. He says, the reason this word, this is all of man, right? This is all of man. What is he saying? Rav Elazar says, he says, the entire world was created for the sake of this person. And Rashi says, he brings out, he says that God created a world where it's all of these different concepts going on. There's wealth, there's influence, there's beauty, there's all these different things that are going on in the world. And God created all these things in the world to create a person that would eventually have fear of Hashem and be able to see Hashem through all of this. And Rashi says, on Rav Elazar's comment, he says that the whole purpose, that when this person would arise, there would be no purpose for creation. That all of creation, everything that you see around you, was created for the Jew to get to a point where we had complete faith in Hashem, and nothing but Hashem existed. And when the Jew gets to that place, nothing else in the world exists. And so there's another opinion. Another opinion is by Rebbe Abba Bar Kohana, right? And he says like this. He says, a person who fears God and keeps the Torah, keeps the mitzvot, is equal in importance to all of creation. Right? So you have all of creation. This is big concepts. I'm looking at these faces. Like, this is a big concept. We're saying that creation, it's not just about us being the righteous people. This is the fact that Hashem created a world. The only purpose of this entire world, the only purpose for this entire world was for the Jewish people people who had the Torah. And we're going to get to what the Torah is. That's where we're going to talk about the Alter Rebbe, and we're going to bring his ideas. But the whole purpose of the whole existence that we live in right now was for Hashem to create people. I mean, you have Avraham Avinu, Sarah Minu, but we're saying to create a people that would have this fear of Hashem and want to keep the Torah. And there's one opinion that says once these people or once this individual emerges, there's no purpose for creation. Game over. Game over. It's all over. Right? So Adam Rishon, right? Adam Rishon is in Gan Eden. You know, he had the ability to keep the entire Torah, to fear only Hashem, only Hashem. You know what? He didn't complete the task. So the world continued on. But he could have finished the whole deal. Adam could have did the whole deal. And he fast-tracked that later, the 26 generations later. You have the Jewish people. They received the Torah on Har Sinai. And then right after that, what happened? The Egel. That was another opportunity for us to complete the whole deal. And if we would have completed the whole situation in that moment, if we would have completed the vacancy of Hashem, the whole world, there would have been no purpose. When they say, oh, Mashiach would have came, you know, it would have been done if the Jewish people would do that. You know, and there's some people that say, there's certain sages that say, anti-Semitism started with the Egel. Why? Because when the Yam Suf happened and the world started to change, that all the people went to Bilam. You remember Bilam? We just learned about him a little while ago. Bilam, all the people of the world came to Bilam. He said the Jewish people are going to receive the Torah on Mount Sinai, and the world's going to be perfect, and this whole thing. The only person that comes, we know the story, is Jethro. Jethro comes, the whole thing. But the point is saying that the world was thinking that we were going to enter this perfected reality. And there's sages that say that we let the world down when we built the Egel. And because of that moment, the other nations started to despise us. You guys are the chosen people. Hashem said, you said you wanted the Torah, and you know what? And you didn't keep it. You didn't do your job. And so because of that, we live in this world of total galus. The whole world is in this place of unconnected fulfillment. And because of that, to this day, when they see Jews not keeping the Torah, they get angry. The rest of the world. Right or wrong, Yaakov? The whole world gets angry when they see us not keeping the Torah because it's in their DNA that there was a moment when they counted on us to keep the whole Torah, to create a perfected reality, and we didn't do it. And so when we don't keep the Torah, they want to kick us out of the land. They say, we don't want nothing to do with you guys. Because inside of ourselves, we know that you guys, Hashem made it a covenant with you guys, that you guys were going to be the ones that pull us out of our Mitzrayim in the same way that Moshe Rabbeinu pulled you out. And so when you go against that, and you try to fit in with us, we were disgusted by you guys. So the second opinion is by Rabbi Kahana. He says that the person, when the Jewish people keep the Torah, they're equal to all of creation. So all the billions of people on planet Earth, and all of their good deeds, and all of nature, and all the plants, and all the insects, and all the animals, everything, we're equal to that when we keep the Torah. So what is the point? Where am I getting at? Because, this is a very in-depth Gemara. It's like, I wish, if it wasn't like a Shiur, because you guys would start falling asleep. We go into it because it's a phenomenal idea. I'm just going to bring these two ideas, is to say that this creates a premise. This creates a premise to why we're here. Hashem created a world where people would keep the Torah. This is why Hashem created the world. Nothing else. That's it. You could become a billionaire, 100 billionaire. Jeffrey Bezos, Bill Gates, and give me another one.
Mark Zuckerberg.
Who?
Mark Zuckerberg.
Mark Zuckerberg. All combined, mixed. A mixed child of billionaires, right? That is not why the world was created. That is not why the world is created. The world was created for people to fear Hashem and keep the Torah. And we're going to go deeper into why the Torah was created. So, could you bring me the Chumash? Why the Torah was created. Because this is why we're here. Okay, fine, it's not widely talked about. We've been persecuted. All these terrible things, thank you. All these terrible things have happened. All these terrible things have happened to us. But the reason why we were created as human beings was to keep the Torah. It doesn't matter if you're poor and you live in a Mir Sharim or you're living in a lavish house. with Shimmy and Pearl over here, in this amazing place. The other place was amazing too. And so the point is to say, it doesn't matter what, on Rosh Hashanah, Hashem decides how much wealth we're going to have, every Jew. He decides how much wealth we're going to have. But the point is saying that wealth or whatever panasa, whatever sustenance that we have in our life has nothing to do with why we were created as Jews. A person who's a Baal Tshuva, a person who's a Ger, it doesn't matter. The point is saying we are here to keep the Torah. And anytime we do not keep the Torah, the world rejects us. The world rejects us, not just the anti-Semites. Even the ones who don't say that they're anti-Semites, they're disgusted by it. So like, wait, your name was Shimon, why are you calling yourself Sam? You're a Jew, you're supposed to show me something different. Oh, they don't have the words to articulate it. They're not on CNN saying this. They're not on Fox News saying this. But inside, that's what they're thinking. Because every innovation that's happened on planet Earth since the time of Avraham Avinu has come through that lineage. Every idea that the non-Jewish world have, every philosophy, every concept, everything that they've created has come through the inspiration of a Jewish person or the descendants of Avraham Avinu. And I'm saying Jewish in terms of Bnei Israel, the nation being formed on Har Sinai. Every single idea. People praise America. Say, oh, America, it's a republic, it's a democracy. Where did they get this idea from? Where did they get the idea of judges? Where did they get the idea of witnesses, Adam? Where did they get the idea of a trial? Where did they get the idea of a court system? Where did they get the idea of morality? You think they just came up with this? Generation of Noah didn't have this. Generation of Noah didn't have any form of morality. That's, Hashem had to wipe them out. So the whole idea with the basis of the highest parts of human nature, the highest parts of society, is a reflection of the Jewish people. And that's the beginning of this conversation. This is who we are, and either we own it or we don't. We could go to work tomorrow, we could watch television and say, you know what, Shabbat, kosher, these different things. And most of the people here, if you're here tonight, you're in the game, you know what I mean? But we still need to be reminded that this is a reality that God has created for us, and this reality is only because the world was created for this purpose. That's it. I don't care what happens 1,000 years from now. Hopefully Mashiach comes before then. But the point is saying, this is why the world was created. This isn't our Gemara. This isn't an inspirational Kiruv speech. This is information that was written thousands of years ago. That this is why the world was created. So let's go a little step further. So let's progress from all of that pressure I put on everyone here. And we're going to go into something a little bit lighter. Not fully lighter, a little bit lighter. And so going into the book of Devarim, it's an interesting idea, right? So we just spoke about words. A person that fears God and loves Hashem, his words are heard in heaven. So we're going into the book of Devarim, and it starts off, I'm going to start with this idea of the Barbanel. So the Barbanel says like this. We know the Barbanel is. You guys are all like Tommy Coughlin, right? All right, maybe not. So the Barbanel is one of our greatest sages. And there's a rabbi that actually I built somewhat of a kesher with, Tovia Singer. And, he said to me, like, we had our Shiur Bakot, like, weeks ago, we're still new in this, but weeks ago, and Tovia Singer, he said that, I was asking him, like, how do you deal with all this craziness we see in the Jewish world? We see Jews that aren't necessarily in support of Judaism, Jews that are against the state of Israel, Jews that, aren't, may look religious, but they may not act religious. These things are all going on, right? Because, we're still human beings. And Tovia Singer says, anybody who has a problem with that has not learned the Tanakh. Because if you learn the Tanakh, and you go in, especially in the book of Isaiah, you're going to see things that are exactly what the Tanakh is telling us we're going to see amongst our fellow Jews. Things that aren't always so great. And sometimes in the non-Jewish world, they see things from people who are Jewish, and they say, see, look at that Jew, look what he's doing. They're not really chosen, they're not really righteous. But this is one guy. It's one guy. You can't judge all of us on that. But it's a reminder that the world sees us as one collective. But Tovia Singer, he said, if you learn the book of Isaiah in depth, and he said you only can learn it through the Barbanel. He says if you can learn it in depth through the Barbanel, he says that you're going to get you would even get pleasure by seeing some of the dysfunctional habits that we have inside of our community, because this is the way it's supposed to be. I was just talking to, Ariel earlier today, and we were talking about the idea of the prophet Zechariah. And it's like he was here, in where was he at? In the old city by the base of Mikdash. And he literally got stoned to death by our brethren. Why? Because he was giving them so much rebuke. This is us at times. We're not perfect people. The Torah is perfect. The Torah is perfect. The mitzvot are perfect. But we're not necessarily perfect all the time. And it's important to recognize that, because sometimes we could become disheartened by the things that we see in the Jewish world. When you see Jewish kids on college campuses protesting against Israel, it's like, bro, where are you going? Where are you going? Okay, you're protesting against Israel. Okay, America at times have denied Jews entry into this country. America right now is accepting anti-Semitism to some degree at the Oval Office. They're accepting it. Biden told people, you know what? Don't wear your yarmulkes. You need to wake up. You're protesting against Israel? Like, there's something going on in their psychology. But we cannot judge the Torah based off of that. We cannot judge the Masurah based off of that. So the Barbanel asked a question. So the Barbanel is asking a question based off of Ramban, Nachmanides, because Nachmanides says in the book of Devarim, what happened? We're good?
Yeah.
Okay. It's a different sound. So anyways, Nachmanides asked, he asked a question. He says, in this book, or he makes a statement, in this book, and if anybody has any questions or a statement, feel free to jump in, right? I saw Neely's Shiur last night. People were jumping in. I'm holding back Neely tonight. So the point is like this. The Ramban, he says that in the book of Devarim, there isn't a Vaidaber El Moshe Lemor. There isn't a direct speaking to Hashem, to Moshe, to give to the Jewish people. That doesn't exist. Support, could you buy me the Hasidus Masters? There isn't a direct communication written about Hashem speaking. Thank you. Hashem speaking to the Jewish people through Moshe Rabbeinu. None of that exists, right? In fact, it says Ella Devarim Asher Dever Moshe El Kol Israel. He's like, these are the words Moshe addressed to Israel, right? These are the words that Moshe gave. Everything else is Hashem said to Moshe over and over again. So in this book, that's not the whole book. And this book is a preparation for the Jewish people to go into Eretz Israel. This is a preparation. This is the massage. It's a lot of rebuke. But this is the preparation before they go into Eretz Israel. And so the Barbanel asked the question, if we have three books in the Chumash, that talk about this idea of Hashem speaking to Moshe, and Moshe speaking to the Jewish people, Hashem speaking to Moshe, saying, speak to Aaron and the high priest. If this is the case, and all of a sudden it stops now, what's going on? Who wrote this book? Did Moshe write this book himself? Or is it Hashem? And if it's Hashem, how do we understand it? So he says like this, the Barbanel, I'm just going to read his words exactly. I'm reading them in English. Baruch Hashem for translations. So he said, the question is whether this book is from heaven, like the first four books, or rather, since it is all in Moshe's voice, are these words of Moshe and not God? So before I answer the question, anybody have an answer to that? Nobody has? You guys were out? You guys were with me? Yeah. So was this book written by Moshe, or was it written by Hashem? And so I'm going to bring this idea, and this is one of my favorite ideas, and every time I get a chance to say this idea, I'm going to, I just jump at the opportunity. And so this is, I guess you could call it a mimer. It's from Likutei Amrim. And this is the Tanya. And it was written by the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Zalman, and he has this concept, and some of the people who know me very well have probably heard this idea before, like Zohar, some other people. for sure supported her a bunch of times. But this is the idea that he writes about the Torah. And this idea is like, it's so incredibly deep and so incredibly profound. And it literally changed my life when I read it. And that's why, I like to say things anytime I get a chance to say it over and over again, because I want these ideas to become a part of who I am as a person. Like, it's not just like learning something and saying like, oh wow, what a great idea. It's about this idea becoming a part of a person. Like, I always say this is a rabbi I'm from Los Angeles, and is a rabbi there, Rabbi Jadidi. He's a big Talmid Chacham in the community, and he talks, and I used to sit in the Shiur a lot, and he used to say, you know what, it's not just about keeping the mitzvot, it's about becoming the mitzvot. It's becoming a part of who you are. What do you mean? So use the example of a person inside of a shul. So in the shul it says, you shouldn't have idle chatter in the shul, right? So, okay, Dafka, you're in the shul, you don't do it. You don't do it in the shul. But if you become that mitzvah, that means you don't have idle chatter in your life, period. You never have idle chatter in your life, period. Why? Because you don't want to waste your words. You don't want to waste your time, right? So there's an idea of becoming the mitzvot. So I'm taking it a little bit a step further, and I'm saying, you know what? It's not just about becoming the mitzvot. It's about also becoming the Devar Torah. It's also about becoming the Mishnah. It's about becoming the things that we learn and saying, like, how can I become this person? So this is the idea. So he calls this idea garments of the soul. Have you guys heard of this? It's an idea called garments of the soul. And so the garments of the soul like this. He says like this, and I'm going to paraphrase because I'm going to try to keep it excited and not just read inside. But he says, the garments of the soul are the Torah and the mitzvot. And he says, and even though they're called the garments of the soul, they're actually infinite higher than the soul. And he said the Zohar, you guys heard of the Zohar? The Zohar teaches us that the Torah and God are one. And he says the Torah is the will and the wisdom of Hashem. The whole concept of Hashem, something that's beyond our logic, beyond our imagination, which he's going to say, the will and the wisdom of something that's beyond our imagination, something that think about it. We just talked about the idea that the entire world was created for a person to keep the Torah and to fear and love Hashem. We just talked about that. So how do we get to that place? How do we get to that place as individuals? Very nice, Mordechai. Wow, what a big Gemara you brought. We gotta fear Hashem, and if we say these things, Hashem's going to hear our words. He's going to hear our Devarim. He's going to hear these things. But the point is saying, the idea is to say, like, you know what? How do we get to that place? After we leave this year, after we go home, how do we get to a place where we have the understanding, the clarity within ourselves that we have the power to create reality with our words? That even if Hashem is not speaking to Moshe Rabbeinu directly, that we have the power and we have the koach to be able to communicate to God and create reality. That every person here wants to be with their Basher. Every single person here wants Parnasa. Every person here wants to have good health. And what we're saying is that we have the power to create that with our words, with our thoughts. This is what the Torah is teaching us. So he says, he brings the Machmanides. We're with Nachmanides. We're learning it. He spells it with the N here. This is with M. Machmanides. He says that Hashem is the knower, the subject of knowledge, and the knowledge itself. Every single thing is Hashem. And that's right, the Baal Shem Tov even says, he says, if a person really contemplated on the greatness of Hashem, they'll have complete humility when they daven. What does that mean? That means that the idea is to say, wait, I'm going to daven and I'm going to daven Hashem. Wait, but think about it. Who created the intellectual thinking that I can't talk to Hashem? Whoa, Hashem did that. Who gave me the physical strength to get out of the bed to daven to Hashem? Who gave me the strength to do that? Oh, wait, Hashem gave me the strength. Who gave me the ability to speak the words to communicate to Hashem? Hashem gave me that too. What am I doing? Oh, I woke up this morning, I wrapped tefillin, I got up, oh, I'm such a hero. But Hashem gave you everything in order to do that. The only thing that you have was your bechira, which is your free will to decide that you were going to do that. And then you activate Hashem. So the whole sugya, everything that we experience is Hashem. Everything is Hashem. All we have is the free will to choose to accept that idea. That's all we have. Everything else is Hashem. So he says, God And again, we're back with the Alter Rebbe. He says God is infinite. He's known as the Ein Sof. And regarding him is written, it says this in Psalms, there's no fathoming God's greatness. You can't forget it. This is David Melech. Back to the base of Mikdash, Shlomo Melech. But David Melech, he says, you can't fathom his greatness. And it says in the Tikkun Zohar, it says, it's likewise taught that there's no thought can grasp him. The human intellect was not created to understand the totality of Hashem. We'll never understand it. It's beyond our logic. It's beyond our imagination. The greatest concept, the highest level we can imagine at whatever state of nirvana we could reach. And I don't really know what that means. But the point is saying that whatever the highest state is, we can never grasp the totality of Hashem. It's beyond our imagination. So Alter Rebbe, this is what he wrote in his own words. He says, just as God is infinite, so are his will and his wisdom. We just said that the Torah is the will and wisdom of God. Then we just learned that God is beyond our imagination. And then he just says right here, just as God is infinite, so is his will and his wisdom. The Torah itself is beyond our imagination. And he says, thus is written that there's no fathoming. The book of Isaiah says, there's no fathoming his understanding. And in Job, it says, likewise is written, he asks the question, can you by searching find Hashem? And that book of Isaiah says, your thoughts are not my thoughts. This is prophecy. Hashem is saying, your thoughts are not my thoughts. Yeah? Everything okay? Your thoughts are not my thoughts. So here's the big concept. And he says, still we were taught, this is our Masur. It says this in Megillah, Megillah 31a, if you have an art scroll. It says, we are taught that in every place you find God's greatness, you also find his humility. So what does that mean? What does that mean? That means that those moments, when we have those aha moments, we're like, wow, Hashem's presence is real. Or we look outside, we look at nature, we look at the sophistication of how nature was designed, and we say like, wow, look at Hashem. Look at the greatness of Hashem. I remember, when I was on my path to Judaism, I used to hang out with this one rabbi in LA a lot, and he had these kids, really charismatic kids. And I remember one day we were walking home from shul, on daytime. It was daytime, and we were going back to his house actually for a meal, and there was all these insects on the ground, and all these insects were walking on the ground, and the kids flipped out. The kids were like, oh my God, pizza's here, you guys, calm down. The pizza's here, calm down, we're going to get there. We're almost done. You're almost done. I know. Pizza and beer. Shiur and beer. Shout outs to Johnny and Elisheva for really starting this whole thing and keeping it going. Hashem should bless their house. And so he says, every place that you have anytime you're able to understand Hashem on any level, that's God humbling himself. So what's my favorite analogy to explain this? So what's your name? David. We met, I've seen you many times. And I've spoken many places, been there. So imagine, and I'm not trying to make fun, but imagine David's playing one-on-one with LeBron James, right? Basketball. They're playing one-on-one. Maybe you're a good basketball player. I don't know. Maybe you play in Israeli league. I don't know. Who knows, right? But imagine they're playing against each other in basketball. And LeBron James says, I'm going to humble myself so much because I love David so much. I'm going to humble myself to the point where David feels that he's dominating me in this basketball game. We're going to play one-on-one, and David is going to feel like he's dominating me, and he's going to get, at the end of this game, he'll say, why am I not in the NBA? Why am I working this, six-figure computer job where I could be making millions of dollars, every year, right? That was a shout-out to him in his pronunciation. And so the point is saying that LeBron James is, considered one of the greatest athletes, one of the greatest basketball players of our time. But the fact that he's able to bring himself to a level and humble himself to a level where he's playing against David and David feels that he's the best player in the NBA, this is our relationship with Hashem. On like a dot. I mean, it's not even comparable. But the idea that Hashem is so great, he's so beyond our imagination, that he makes us feel that we understand him in our everyday life through these moments. These aha moments, looking at nature, this whole thing. So the Alter Rebbe, he says, God God, he brings another, is from Megillah as well. He says, God thus constricts his will and his wisdom in his 613 mitzvahs of the Torah and their laws. His will and wisdom are constrained, are concealed inside of the combination of the Hebrew letters and the Torah itself, as well as the explanations found in the Talmud. Wow, we just learned some Talmud. And the Midrashim. So in the same way that LeBron James is humbling himself to allow David to feel that he is one of the great basketball players in the world of our time, in the same way that God is beyond our imagination, he allows us to experience him through the Torah itself, through the 613 mitzvahs, through the Gemara, through the Talmud, through the Mishnah, through the Gemara, through our Tanaim, Amarim. He conceals himself in the Midrashim. When we're learning these things like, oh my God, I had this great idea. I just read this great Midrash. I understand Hashem. I feel closer. I'm connected to him. The whole thing. That's Hashem humbling himself. He's doing the LeBron James with David. Because he's beyond our logic. He's beyond our imagination. Our minds aren't able to even grasp Hashem even a little bit. But Hashem brings himself to such a level that we can actually connect to Hashem. And he goes even a step further. He says, while bound to the body. Right? These are people, who may not know Hebrew as well as Jacob Fauci. He says, while bound to the body, the soul can comprehend these letters. So even if you don't understand the deepest levels of the Zohar, your soul knows it. Your soul knows it. It was a famous idea when there's future mothers in this room, there's mothers who have children. When the child is inside the womb, that there's an angel that comes to that child and teaches them the entire Torah, the entire Torah. They know the whole thing. But when they come into this world, they forget on a conscious level. But the soul still remembered that experience of the chavrusa with the angel. The soul still knows. So he says, it is also, he says, it can also be applicable, the commandments. He says, not only that, he said that the commandments that we have are expressed in thought, speech, and action. The Torah and the commandments then form a garment to the soul. So that original soul that was inside the mother's womb, that connected to this infinite wisdom of the Torah, Hashem humbled himself to such a level that he brought that essence back down to us. Even though we don't remember it, he brought that essence back down to us to the point, and I know you guys can smell the pizza, so can I. He brought it down to such a point that now Hashem's wisdom and his will literally becomes fashion. What do I mean by fashion? It becomes garments that literally surround our soul. And he said, and for this reason, and the people in New York watching this will relate to this. For this reason, the Torah is likened, and it says this in Baba Kama. For all the yeshiva guys, it's Baba Kama. It says in Baba Kama, the Torah is likened, is compared to water. Just as the water flows down from a high place, so does the Torah descends from a place of glory. So again, this is destroyed. I have a book in front of me. This is the Chumash. The Alter Rebbe just destroyed this book. He said that this is just an aspect of the Torah. The Torah itself is literally an energy force that emanates from Hashem. As we start off with, the Torah and Hashem are one. The Torah emanates from this upper world. It's like literally an energy force. It's put on our sci-fi lenses. It is an energy that's coming down into this world. And it says, when he comes down into this world, he says the Torah originates in God's will and wisdom, something beyond our imagination. And he says, where the Torah and God are one. And there, he said, and where no thought can grasp him. We just heard that. And he said, and from this place, he said the Torah descends from Sfirot to Sfirot. We just had the yard site last night. Rabbi Isaac Luria. He had this idea that the 10 Sfiros, right? Keter the Malchut. Keter, Chokmah, Bina, right? I guess you could throw in Dad, I don't know. Hesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzachot, Yesod, Malchut. These are the different levels of how, it's like, we have a ruler, right? When we're in grade school, we have these projects where they'll take the ruler and say, how long is this? 3 inches. Some of you guys are from England and Europe. You guys don't have these these measurements. But the point is, the people from America, we got these measurements. How to understand distance, this many miles, this many kilometers, these different things. The Arizal created a measurement system that we can understand God's light force disseminating into this world. And he breaks it down into 10 different dimensions. And so the Alter Rebbe says those 10 different dimensions that the Torah comes down into this world is the very process that we experience the Torah from. And so he says, thus the Torah enters the realm of the physical, which comprise of the vast majority of the commandments. Up here is just pure light. It's just pure light. But then as it comes down, it forms. Like, I think there's a famous idea. Everyone knows this idea. That the Mitzrayim, that the angels were scared to come in Mitzrayim because the darkness, the tumah was so great that they were scared that if they came in Mitzrayim, they would become humans. Right? That their form would change. So there's an idea that up here they're angels, down here they're humans. So in the same way that up here, that this pure energy, down here, it's physical words. It's a book. It's pasukim. Oh, but it's a book. It's just a book. You know, you got this book. This religious group has this book. That religious group has that book. Everyone has a book. This is our book. No! We're not saying that. We're saying that the Torah itself is a light force emanating from Hashem. And that light force emanating from Hashem, when it comes into this physical world, when it comes in the world of Malchut, it forms itself into what we call a book, into letters, into words, into pasukim, into a parsha. That's what it becomes, into different books. This is what the Torah is. It's not a concept. It's not words. It's the lowest level of the Torah is the words, and that's why they say when we read our Chachamim, when we read, the sages throughout the generation, it's not just reading their words, but it's also connecting to the energy behind the words. When we read the Torah, it's about the love that we connect to through Moshe Rabbeinu, through HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That love that they had for us, that want us to reach our total potential in this lifetime, that love is behind the words of the Torah. And that's why it's the biggest selling book ever. Right? And so the point is, I could go further with it, but I don't. It's a humongous idea. But the idea is like this. The Barbanel asked a question. Was it written by God or not? And this is his words. He says, in fact, Moshe told the Israelites all the things because he was soon to part from them. So Moshe was getting ready to leave to the next world. And he wrote them into the Torah. He wanted them to be in the Torah themselves. Not just the idea that they have a Torah. We are inside of the Torah. Not just this generation. We're inside of the Torah right now. We're inside of God's wisdom and God's will. We're inside of that right now. It's not a separate idea. It's not over there. It's not a book. This is you. This is you. The book of Devarim is you inside of the Torah. This is you. You're a part of this. The first books were about this thing, God. This book is you inside of the Torah. And he says, the Holy One wanted them as part of the Torah, so he can dictate them to Moshe. And he says, and Moshe wrote them in the Torah and commanded commanded by the Almighty. And so he says, so the whole idea of this particular book of Devarim is an idea to say that, hey, guess what? Hashem is not speaking to Moshe directly, but he told Moshe to bring us into the Torah directly by Moshe communicating directly to the Jewish people. And so when we look at our lives, when we look at this time of the 3 weeks, we're getting close to one of the worst times in Jewish history when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, is because there was a part of history that we forgot about these ideas. We forgot that we were the people that were chosen to bring the light of the Torah into the world. We forgot that we were supposed to be the element of why creation was, why God created creation. We forgot those things. And because we forgot those things, the Satan, the dark side, convinced us to do things that ultimately led to the biggest demise and the biggest negativities that we've experienced in human history. The basic Mikdash, with Shlomo Melech, he wrote that even the non-Jewish nations brought sacrifices. The basic Mikdash was something for all of humanity. It was something for all the people on planet Earth. That's what the basic Mikdash was. It was a bringing a light of Hashem to all of humanity. There's sages that say if the non-Jewish world understood the power of the basic Mikdash, they would be holding us by swords to rebuild it and to keep the sacrifices, and for the Kohanim and for the Levim to do the things that they're supposed to do, and Bnei Israel to do the things they're supposed to do. But it's concealed. And so as we go into this new idea, this place that we're at right now, that we could look at our lives and we could look at ourselves and say, you know what? Where have I forgot about that role with myself? How much have I been convinced by this world that's around me, the beauty of this world, the influence of this world, the energy of this world? How much has that world convinced me to not be as close to the Torah as I should be? To not love my fellow Jew as much as I should? To not have patience with my fellow Jew? To have patience with myself? And if I disconnected, to be able to do tshuva and to rebuild myself. How much of the world has convinced me to not do those things? Because everyone has a story. Everybody is a Sefer Torah. Every Jew here is a Sefer Torah. And everyone has a unique Torah. Whether you're coming from the Torah of Yethro as a ger, whether you're coming through the Torah as a Bat Tshuva, whether you're coming through the Torah as a FFB. All of these stories are inside of our Chumash, inside of our Tanakh, and explained in our Midrashim and our Talmud. So we have a chance to rebuild that part of ourselves, to ask Hashem to rebuild the temple within ourselves, to rebuild the Mishkan inside of ourselves, to be able to see our true purpose in this world and why we're here in this world and what our purpose is. And so my bracha to everybody is that we have the strength and we have the koach to enjoy the pizza, and also to be able to rebuild ourselves through these last few days, and not just to look at it as a day of like, oh, we have these restrictions, we can't do this, but we actually have an opportunity to rebuild ourselves and reconnect ourselves to Hashem in a new way.
Amen.
Thank you.
Amen.